To help me present today is my colleague. So both of us are instructors at Cerritos High School. We are involved with the engineering program there. We're science teachers. We've been involved for many years collectively doing teaching of high school students, and some of them are here. You can hear that.
My name is Brian Jernigan. Like you said, we're colleagues. We're together because we form a partnership that's unique at Cerritos High School. He's the brains, and I'm more of the social side of everything. And together we have one thing in common, and that's educating our kids and building up a positive workforce when it comes to science. So that's why he has me here. All right.
So what we're trying to get across in this half hour that we spend with you is what we feel are the motivations that need to be in place to successfully have a Mars program. And you talk about colonizing Mars, you talk about building a future there. We need to have a force here on Earth that enables and mobilizes to actually carry it out. So over the course of this half hour, this is what we're trying to accomplish.
I call it the big do-over. It's an opportunity for us to go somewhere with a fresh slate and to start something that's free from prejudice, ensure that the U.S. it favors U.S. national interest, and founding a nation that reflects the better side, the better part of human nature.
So, we wanted to be astronauts and such. Well, what do they really want today as far as kids go in general? So.
And it's the glamour of becoming an astronaut is slowly fading away. It used to be, and even when I was a child, people really wanted to become astronauts. We want to go into outer space. We want to fly in the fast jets and fly and do things that other people haven't done. But it's slowly but surely it's fading away. We're moving towards this robotic thing. We're moving towards away from people. So we want to bring it back to people.
Probably too hard to read, but within our generation, what do you want to be when you grow up? The highest answer was teacher. Here we are. Doctor, astronaut, banker, stockbrokers are way down here, soccer players down here.
You're missing a lot of athletes and those kind of things, rap stars and all that other stuff.
But
look at it today.
Totally different. Number one goal for a child today is to be a model. A soccer player. This survey was carried out in Great Britain recently, and so the children there asked them, what do you want to be? I want to be royalty when I grow up. Okay, so they're not associating the fact that you have to be born into it. You have to be born into it.
Exactly. Right? Something you can achieve in school. There's musicians, there's chefs, there's, what is that? A socialite. And then, as you can see down there, politicians. Where they should be.
The only technical option on this thing is to be a pilot. And so we were kind of wondering, well, technically, yeah, not necessarily. Right, there you go.
And one thing that stood out to me is that none of these professions require, except for pilot, none of these professions require very much education. So.
And if you want to colonize Mars, you need to have an infrastructure that's not with this skill set. So we have a problem facing. I'm part of the network of educator astronaut teachers, and so within NASA, they have their criteria for becoming an astronaut, and here you go online and look it up. So teachers, qualify on a pathway to becoming astronauts, but you need a bachelor's degree, you need to be physically fit, all the things that we correctly associate with being astronauts. You have to be motivated, and that shows up in your choices and preparation. Just to establish our credentials, if you look on Aviation Week, this year they listed the top 20-year-olds to watch, and this is one of our former students, Deepak here. And he went through our school system and went off. He was in the NASA Inspire program and went off, worked at several different NASA centers, and here he is photographed at the National Air and Space Museum. So just credentials that we have been successful in as we talk with you here today.
And I just want to take a step back real quick. One of the beautiful things about where we teach is that we teach in one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the country. We have kids from all over the world, speaking all different types of languages, all different levels of education that they're striving to achieve. And it's just showing you that this is one of the young men that we've had the pleasure of being in contact with.
Okay, so our dreams were to become astronauts, and we'd like to have kids today have that same dream, but what is the pathway to go from, dreaming of becoming an astronaut to actually being an astronaut? NASA has their own pathway for elementary school.
We both currently teach at a program called Project Lead the Way, which is an engineering program, engineering pathway. We've chosen to take the aerospace engineering route in order to try to get kids interested in going to space.
And so there had been, I mentioned this Inspire program, it's defunct now, but an interdisciplinary national science program incorporating research and education. And that was hiring high school juniors becoming seniors to have 8-week summer jobs at different NASA centers. So that was great, but they were expending thousands of dollars per student trying to build up someone who would choose to apply to NASA after they got to college. And of course, Mars Society.
What's PLTW?
It's Project Lead the Way, it's called. So that began in New York State maybe 14 years ago, and it's now a national program, an engineering pathway for high school students, and they too are expanding down to elementary school, trying to encourage students to take a pathway that leads to becoming an engineering career. This is just one of their engineering specialties. So they have civil engineering, they have computer integrated manufacturing, they have different courses for high school students now, where you can even get college credit. So it's an interesting program, and we're part of it. Of course, Mars Society, Mars Does a Research Station, is a valuable experience along the way. We're trying to do more than just become astronauts. In this group, we're trying to get to Mars. So. I have to say, NASA is good for what their scope is to do, and their scope is not colonize Mars or colonize space. It's not in there. Their scope was to, first of all, help with aeronautics, and they're very good at that, and then help with astronautics, help with exploration, and they're doing a lot of great things these days.
One of the things I pointed out when we were looking at this slide and getting this slide together to Phil is what's missing out of all of those pictures is that there's no people. There's no. You can meet a robot, you can see a robot, you can look at a satellite, but you don't get an opportunity to meet a Martian, a person that's colonized Mars. And there's a lot of glamour in that. There's a celebrity that can be developed.
And Dr. Zubrin spoke this morning about the current NASA plan and his interpretation of, well, it's not really saying, here's our goal, we're going to Mars, and this is all we're doing. He spoke to it this morning at the opening session.
So the New World. So we can look at our history in order to determine what we're going to do with our future and how we're going to handle Mars. And so I think the best way to look at it is the great do-over or the big do-over, an opportunity to start fresh and do things differently. But before we do that, we kind of got to look at what we did wrong and some of the things that happened with the colonization of the United States. So here we have explorers. They're bringing civilization to the natives, right? They're coming to bring something better to the natives. Well, when we go to Mars, we're going there with a blank slate. We're going there. We don't have to bring civilization to the natives. We don't have to provide for something that we think is the best. We can actually look at our history and actually take with us what we think is best. So what do we want here? What are we looking for? We're looking for freedom of speech. If everything was right, it would be freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. So these are the big four wants that we want, or the big four freedoms. So here we go. When we go, we have to figure out who we're going to send. If we send a team of football players, what are we going to develop in Mars? We're going to develop a colony of football players. Yeah, a good team. Better than what we have the Rams, right? That's what we have in California. So if we send a team of football players, what's the culture going to be like? It's going to be centered around everything that's football related, right? If we send a team of cheerleaders, what kind of culture are we going to develop? We're going to develop a culture that's centered around cheerleading. And there's some great things about the team dynamic. I mean, the team dynamic is very efficient. It gets things done. But the one thing that the team dynamic, and I am a coach, it doesn't take into account is the individual's feelings and emotions and those things that the individual holds on dearly to.
And it's worth pointing out that the research shows whatever the founding culture is at the beginning, that's what it's going to be for the next 400 years. So our history, goes back all the way to our Daniel Boone image of the founding of the United States. And so it's really important to think intelligently about the founding culture on Mars.
And even now, what's going on now in the country with the pipeline issues and dealing with racial issues, we're still dealing with what we started with some years ago. But
Just to say, okay, we tend to, look up and forward as we talk about our space program, but it really is important to also look back at our history and make an intelligent choice to try to get things right as we go to Mars. And so, looking at this was a mural up in Oregon, recent artist work, and he was trying to show the progress along the Columbia River, and it shows, the evolution of our culture here with plenty and everything, and it started off with the Indians who originally enjoying smoking salmon along the Columbia River and plenty of food and game. But what's kind of missing is the fact that, well, we did sort of contribute a lot to genocide and wiping out the American Indians as we took over what became the United States. It's kind of inevitable that we were going to expand, but the way we did it, we could have done it much more humane.
And of course, there was another dark chapter in our history with the Atlantic slave trade. But again, it's an opportunity to look at what we did wrong. But when we go to Mars, we don't have to make the same mistakes. We won't make the same mistakes because we're starting with a blank slate. But what Phil was talking about, it's continued throughout history, and we're still dealing with issues that started back when the slave trade was going on. If you look at the Oakland murder map for 2015, the red dots represent shootings, and you can pretty much guess. You don't have to guess. You can tell which group is most greatly affected, and that's direct correlation to things that happened in our past. So it's a lingering ethnic divide.
Okay, there's a recent Nova episode that was on just last week, and it just sort of reinforces the message that we're trying to get across, that we still have issues to be resolved here in the United States. The breaking news from last night, another shooting in Charlotte, and the community's all in uproar. And you've got these factors that inhibit our ability as teachers to be successful. And we're working in the classroom. And if a child is stressed by being in a poor environment, they're not going to be able to learn the engineering it takes to become the workforce that we need to build the ships, to colonize Mars, and do all the things that we aspire to do here in this room. So these are basically just quotes from that, sort of reinforcing things. And again, having a vision of what you want to do is so necessary to map out how to get there.
So desirable Martian characteristics, and I like the fact that we're going to call these people Martian teachers. They have an opportunity to bring with them the knowledge that they've obtained from living in basically a new pristine environment with free from prejudice, freedom from fear, freedom of speech, and all those freedoms that we want, they'll be able to enjoy. So Martian teachers should be free from major prejudice based on ethnicity, gender, age, nationality, religion, political affiliation, and sexual preferences. So that's the desirable person that we're going to send to Mars.
As well as we can.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we just had, Zach Miller's talk about sovereignty and reverse engineering of civilization, a nation state on Mars. So what does it take to have a stable culture? And so we don't really have good research that shows that, but just anecdotally speaking, based on our everyday lives, here's estimates. So let's say that if 20% of the people coming in are trying to change the culture, about 80% can hold fast to what it is. And what are we going to be using for number of people on board ships to go between Earth and Mars? We're trying to not have just 2 people in a Dragon, but something a little bit heftier. So, NASA talks about their group of 6. But the infrastructure that we're going to share with you this half hour includes basically not everyone getting off the ship at the time. So you'll see that in a moment. Of course, the window of opportunity is every 26 months. So let's say that's enough time for newcomers to assimilate to a Martian culture. And I'm going to be promoting that we switch to cycler orbits early on, not waiting until much later down the line as part of building up the right infrastructure. Okay, so this will lead to a chart. We could just say that going to a chart is kind of what we want to see. So, yeah.
By the way, you notice there's lots of numbers, and I'm being quiet because remember, he's the brains, and I'm
and the balance and the logistics.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, all the stuff.
I'm good at pressing the button.
Okay, so if you use those kind of rules of thumb, you could say that in theory, if you were to try to build up a population on Mars and get it up to at least 50 people, a stable population, then, and launching every cycle of opportunity every 26 months and so many people per ship, then in theory, within 18 years, you could establish maybe not sovereignty, but a stable Martian culture. And we want to create one as best we can so that we can start drawing from that and sending them to Earth. And that doesn't mean you go to Mars for 18 years. There will be people who will be coming back relatively early, but not in great numbers. And this is just a stable plateau that says, all right, we're maintaining at least 50 people on Mars indefinitely until the infrastructure increases. Particularly, if they can become sovereign and self-sustaining, that's great. But even doing this much is very ambitious. Keeping 50 people on Mars kind of indefinitely, rotating through. As teachers, these Martians didn't grow up on Mars. They weren't born on Mars. They're people that are in this room right now, theoretically, and that we're preparing, and including Mars Society's contribution, going to the MDRS or the Flashline base and getting that mindset that you're there, and yes, you're exploring, and yes, you're colonizing, but really honing your skills in preparation for serving a larger purpose. It's not enough to talk about just going to Mars and colonizing Mars. There has to be more.
Yeah.
Among other little incentives, so you're college students and you're finally getting your master's degree, how about we give you some incentive and say, all right, here, take this exam, battery test maybe, and if you do really well on it, we'll give you a scholarship to go earn 2 additional master's degrees in 2 different subjects. Because you don't really want to have a PhD on Mars who's super specialized but useless when the plumbing breaks. You really want to have, a jack of all trades, people who've got a broad education in diverse subjects. And so why not give them an incentive? And maybe if they don't quite get the scholarship, at least offer them some employment at one of the places that is preparing the ships and the infrastructure for supporting Mars, logistically supporting Mars. Then of course, they eventually go to Mars. And they explored it. Here they are, cavorting around, using robotics with humans, searching for life, doing the early parts that we expect to do for people on Mars. But more than that, beginning of establishing this stable culture as well.
Right, and you're bringing people back into the picture is the goal.
Now, here's the most important part. You don't go to, in this view, you don't go to Mars to colonize Mars. You go to Mars for the benefit of Earth. And it has to be a direct benefit that can appeal to Congress, it can appeal to environmentalists, it can appeal to the stakeholders here who are going to be funding this trip. So Congress has had a problem in the past of technically legislating how the International Space Station will be built. It says, this component must be built in this congressional district. And we want to get them to divert their energies somewhere else. So how about we look at the Amtrak train route for the United States, we say, okay, for the first Martians to come to the United States, as they get reintroduced to the United States, we let Congress debate which routes they should take across the country. And now it becomes a whole political map. Oh, red states, blue states, and you've got to find time in Congress. Meanwhile, the engineers are busy doing the work, and Congress is leaving them alone. So this is something where, you could take your family on vacation on an Amtrak route and say, hey, I like this route. Look what we get to see. There's the amber waves of grain that, and there's our Purple Mountains majesty. So all of this, and politically have it end at Union Station in Washington, D.C. So during this conference, if you want to take the route down to Union Station and walk up, you could,
They would travel in luxury.
Yeah, those guys.
There would be, you basically be building up the celebrity behind being a Martian.
Right. As they readapt to Earth's gravity, if they've been weightless for a while, if they weren't on artificial gravity on the transit. So what are they going to see, though, when they get here? This is a photo of Los Angeles. Here's where we're from. And
Smog and all.
Smog and all. So here's where the environmentalists get involved. You don't want to show this to the Martians coming to Earth, the people who were students, who went to Mars, did all this work, and they've come back to the United States. You don't want to show them this. So there will be this local drive to make those train routes not see trash and poverty and everything bad, but to make the Earth attractive. And, so you've got company coming, you clean your house up. Same motivation that goes here, and it's not adding to the cost of adding in these stakeholders. All we did was add the Earth side, the third phase of going to Mars. So you work with students, you have them establish a colony on Mars, the best that we can set up, and now the important part where you get the political support, the funding support, the stakeholder support on Earth. And so here they are, they're presenting what they've learned and grown at the Library of Congress here. And the idea is, now it was blogging, but when I had this drawing made up, it was they keep journals and they describe what it was like when they were students exploring their home neighborhood and stuff. They keep journals when they're on Mars, and they keep a record of what they experience as they come back